I have a question for you listening right now, and I really want you to think about this before you answer.
It is a really good question to start with.
Right. So when Google makes just absolute mountains of cash from search ads.
Literal mountains.
Yeah. And when YouTube completely dominates our collective human attention, who are the biggest winners?
Who was actually popping the champagne over that success?
Exactly, because the obvious answer is Google's shareholders, right? You picture the executives in Mountain View just celebrating another record-breaking quarter.
Of course. That's what we're trained to think.
But according to the financial analysis we are diving into today, that obvious answer is actually missing the much bigger, much wilder truth.
It completely misses it.
The loudest cheers for Google's massive success are secretly coming from their supposed arch rivals. I'm talking about Microsoft, I'm talking about Nvidia, I'm talking about Apple.
Which completely upends how we usually think about the business of technology, doesn't it?
It really does. I mean, we are so conditioned by financial news networks.
And those dramatic headlines.
Yes, exactly. To view the tech landscape as this, gladiatorial arena.
A zero-sum battle royale.
Right, where if one giant wins market share, another giant must necessarily be bleeding out on the arena floor.
But the research we're unpacking today, which is incredibly detailed, by the way, deconstructs that entire illusion.
It really tears it down.
It introduces us to this concept of a digital symbiotic empire.
A symbiotic empire. That phrasing really stuck with me.
Yeah, and understanding this empire isn't just an academic exercise for tech nerds.
Not at all.
For anyone listening who is trying to figure out their investment portfolio or planning for retirement.
We're just trying to understand where the global economy is actually heading.
Exactly. Grasping this hidden, interconnected system is practically the ultimate cheat code for investing.
Right, because when I first read through the analytical breakdown you brought to the table today.
The source material.
Yeah, which, for context for you listening, is a brilliant piece of strategy originally targeted at U.S. stock investors and retirement fund managers.
It is.
It completely broke my mental model of how the internet works. We're going to look at why these massive big tech monopolies aren't actually fighting to the death.
They're really not.
So the mission of this deep dive is to show you the reality of an interdependent tech ecosystem.
And more importantly, we want to explain exactly why understanding this architecture is the foundational reason you should be investing in big tech as a broader system.
Rather than trying to pick individual winners in this perceived race.
Precisely. The core theme established by the data is that big tech companies are not individual, isolated gladiators.
They aren't silos.
No, they are in fact the fundamental common denominator of the entire modern digital ecosystem. They form a bedrock.
A foundation.
Right. When you strip away the flashy product launch events,
Just slick keynotes,
and the CEO rivalries that make great clickbait, you find a foundational architecture where the growth of one pillar inherently requires and forces the growth of the others.
That's the crazy part.
The argument here is that to invest successfully in the modern era, you have to stop looking at the companies as isolated entities.
And start seeing them as vital organs within a single massive digital body.
Exactly.
But I want to push back on that gladiator narrative for a second, because it is so deeply ingrained in how we talk about tech.
Oh, it's everywhere.
We see Apple and Google fighting over smartphone market share constantly.
Every single year.
We see Microsoft and Google fiercely competing over enterprise software and enterprise AI tools. It genuinely looks like a war.
It does look like a war on the surface.
So you're saying that beneath that surface-level friction, there's a much deeper architecture of cooperation.
There is.
How does that actually work mechanically? I mean, how does Google winning a search battle actively help Apple or Microsoft?
Well, it comes down to understanding the difference between the micro battles for specific product categories
Okay.
and the macro expansion of the digital economy itself.
The macro expansion.
Right. The media focuses on the micro battles because they're easy to understand.
It's an easy story to tell. Team A versus Team B.
Exactly. But the underlying physics of the digital world operate differently.
How so?
The why behind this symbiosis is rooted in the nature of human attention and what we can call digital real estate.
Digital real estate.
Think about Google's primary function. Through search and YouTube, Google essentially acts as a giant planetary-scale funnel.
A massive funnel for attention.
Yes. Their overarching goal is to bring more human attention into the digital realm and keep it there for longer periods.
Okay, so the more time people spend online,
Searching for information, watching videos, learning skills, entertaining themselves.
the more the overall territory of the digital world expands.
They are literally manufacturing digital space out of human attention.
Okay, let me make sure I'm translating this correctly for the listener.
Go for it.
Instead of the old shopping mall analogy where everyone is competing for foot traffic in a finite physical space.
Which is how traditional retail works.
Right. We are talking about something more like data gravity.
Data gravity, I like that.
When Google builds a better search algorithm or introduces a wildly addictive feature like YouTube Shorts,
They aren't just stealing attention from television.
they are pulling massive amounts of human behavior, intent, and commerce entirely online.
Precisely. They're expanding the pie.
The whole pie gets bigger.
Let's look at the API structures and the data pipelines that run beneath the surface of the internet,
The plumbing.
the plumbing. When that massive influx of human attention hits Google's servers, it doesn't just sit there inertly.
It does something.
It generates data and it generates intent. A user watches the YouTube video about home renovation.
Okay, so that's attention captured by Google.
Right. But that user then needs to buy tools, hire contractors, or design a floor plan.
That makes sense.
That subsequent economic activity doesn't stay walled off inside Google.
Right, it spills over into the rest of the ecosystem.
Exactly. The sheer, overwhelming volume of new digital activity that Google just catalyzed guarantees that Apple and Microsoft are going to see a corresponding lift.
Because they provide the tools for that next step.
Exactly. If Apple is selling the high-margin iPhones required to access that high-definition YouTube content seamlessly,
Or if Microsoft is selling the cloud-based enterprise software that the YouTube creators and the home renovation contractors use to run their underlying businesses.
they are directly benefiting from Google's initial capture of that attention.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate here for a second.
Please do.
What about instances where they actively hurt each other?
It's a question.
Like a few years ago, Apple introduced the App Tracking Transparency Framework, ATT.
Oh, yeah, that was huge.
It basically asked iPhone users if they wanted to be tracked by apps, and everyone said no.
Almost universally.
And that privacy change reportedly cost Meta and Google tens of billions of dollars in lost ad revenue.
It was a massive hit.
That doesn't sound very symbiotic. That sounds like Apple actively kneecapping its peers. How does that fit into this model?
That is a fantastic point to raise, and it highlights the nuance of the analysis we're looking at.
Because it seems like a contradiction.
It does, but the existence of a symbiotic macrostructure does not mean there isn't intense friction at the borders of these empires.
Friction at the borders.
Apple's ATT move was a massive blow to Meta's specific ad targeting mechanism, no doubt.
Right.
But here is the critical distinction. It didn't shrink the total amount of digital commerce or the total amount of time people spent on their phones.
Oh, I see.
It shifted where the value was captured in the short term, but the underlying reliance remained.
The foundation didn't crack.
Exactly. Meta still needs Apple's iOS platform to reach a premium user base.
And Apple absolutely needs Meta's suite of apps, like Instagram, WhatsApp.
Because an iPhone without those apps is practically useless to a massive percentage of the global population.
Ah, I see. So the friction is real, but it's happening within a container they all share.
That's a great way to put it.
They might fight over the exact split of the profits, but they are all deeply invested in making sure the container itself keeps growing.
Exactly. The illusion of fierce winner-take-all competition is maintained because it serves the companies well.
How does it serve them?
It keeps antitrust regulators somewhat at bay.
Because they can point and say, look how hard we're fighting.
Right. And it absolutely drives internal innovation. But the reality of symbiosis is where the actual systemic wealth is generated.
So Google doesn't want to destroy device manufacturers like Apple or enterprise software companies like Microsoft.
It fundamentally requires them to exist, innovate, and thrive.
So that the massive attention Google harvests has places to go
Hardware to run on.
and ways to be monetized on the back end.
Yes.
This totally changes the lens through which you have to look at your stock portfolio.
Completed.
If you are sitting there holding Apple stock and you see Google report a massive, unexpected increase in YouTube viewership and search volume.
Your instinct as a traditional investor might be, oh no, Google is winning.
Right, maybe people are going to switch to Android.
But according to this logic, your reaction should actually be excellent. Google is expanding the total market of digital attention.
More high bandwidth media consumption means more people are going to need high-end screens,
Better processors.
premium devices to consume that media, which plays right into Apple's hardware strategy.
It's a foundational paradigm shift for anyone looking to build long-term wealth. You aren't betting on a horse race.
You're betting on the racetrack itself getting wider, longer, and faster.
The analysis makes it clear. The interconnectedness is the feature, not a bug.
Okay, we've established the macro concept. This idea of the expanding digital territory and the symbiotic gravity of big tech.
The container.
Right, the container. But let's get out of the theoretical and transition into the actual physical nuts and bolts reality of what happens when a company like Google scales up.
Because it gets very physical.
Yeah, the internet isn't just magic data floating in the air. It's intensely physical.
Heavy metal in silicon.
And the research specifically points to the relationship between data, artificial intelligence, and the heavy hardware required to process it.
The infrastructure.
Let's talk about the data and infrastructure black hole, specifically looking at Google's AI, Gemini, and YouTube.
This is where the abstract concept of symbiosis becomes incredibly concrete.
And frankly, very expensive.
Unbelievably expensive. The analysis points out a fundamental equation driving the modern tech economy.
Which is?
Google's search engine and YouTube create an exponentially growing, incomprehensibly massive volume of data.
A second.
Billions of behavioral data points, text queries, video uploads, user interactions, all being generated constantly.
And now Google's artificial intelligence, Gemini, feeds on this exact data.
The data is the raw caloric intake that allows the large language model to be trained.
To learn and to improve its predictive capabilities.
But the physical bottleneck here is staggering.
Because processing this astronomical amount of data requires highly specialized, incredibly powerful hardware.
And the research points a massive, undeniable neon arrow at one specific company for this hardware.
Nvidia. Yeah?
Specifically, their H100 chips and the subsequent generations of that architecture.
Yes. The text makes a direct, unbreakable link between Google's software ambitions and Nvidia's hardware dominance.
To understand why this is so critical, we have to look at how large language models like Gemini actually work.
Right, because it's not like running a normal program.
Exactly. Traditional search algorithms could run on standard CPUs, central processing units.
Which are great for sequential tasks.
Right. But training an AI model requires parallel processing.
Doing a bunch of things at once.
It requires performing millions of mathematical calculations simultaneously rather than sequentially.
And this is exactly what NVIDIA's GPU's graphics processing units were originally designed to do for video games.
Rendering thousands of pixels at the same time.
And what they have now been perfectly optimized to do for AI matrix multiplication.
So we aren't just talking about buying a few more servers.
We are talking about a fundamental shift in the kind of compute power required to keep the lights on and keep the AI getting smarter.
Precisely. The expansion of Google Cloud, the multi-month training, runs for new iterations of Gemini.
The real-time algorithmic processing required to serve the perfect YouTube short just to keep a user engaged for another 10 minutes.
All of this directly breathes life into the entire data center component industry.
With NVIDIA sitting at the absolute apex,
commanding unprecedented profit margins.
I want to dive deeper into this cycle because it's a fascinating loop.
It really is.
The analysis suggests that we shouldn't even look at YouTube and Google search as just services or websites anymore.
That's a totally outdated model.
They are massive global data harvesting engines.
Engines is the right word.
You go to YouTube to watch a tutorial on how to fix your sink, but what you are actually doing is providing the engine with behavioral data.
How long did you hover over the thumbnail?
Did you skip the ad?
Did you rewind a specific complex part of the video?
All of that granular data gets scooped up, anonymized, and fed into the AI.
Into Gemini.
To make it smarter at predicting human behavior. But the AI can't just think into the void.
No, it needs a physical brain to process all those variables.
And that physical brain is made of highly advanced silicon.
This is a critical insight for anyone listening to internalize. Software growth dictates hardware explosions.
They are not independent variables.
Not at all. Google simply cannot expand its AI ambitions. It cannot make Gemini smarter or more capable without physically building out massive, sprawling data center infrastructure.
Therefore, a software company's ambition Google's existential desire to have the most capable AI in the world to defend its search monopoly.
Structurally guarantees a hardware company's revenue explosion.
Nvidia's bottom line is directly tied to Google's relentless need to process the data it harvests.
So what does this mean for the future trajectory of these companies?
Right, because as I understand it, AI development isn't like building a bridge,
You mean
where eventually the bridge is finished and you just do minor maintenance. It doesn't just reach a smart enough level and stop.
Oh, definitely not. It's a constant compounding race. The research calls it a black hole of data,
A black hole. That metaphor is very apt,
especially when you consider capital expenditures, or CapEx.
which is the money they spend on physical assets.
Right. If you listen to the earnings calls for Google, Meta, or Microsoft, the numbers they throw around for CapEx are staggering.
Tens of billions of dollars a quarter.
As Gemini gets smarter, it requires exponentially more compute power to train the next, even smarter iteration.
And that's just the training phase,
Exactly. Then you have inference.
which is the compute power required every single time a user actually asks Gemini a question.
It's a recursive loop of compounding computational demands.
And every dollar of that CapEx for Google is essentially a dollar of revenue for Nvidia and the surrounding hardware ecosystem.
Exactly. What this means, and this is a profound point for anyone looking at the long-term viability of these stocks in a retirement portfolio,
Yeah, this is key.
is that the floor for Nvidia's sales is essentially locked in by Google's relentless existential need to expand.
Google cannot afford to stop buying Nvidia chips.
Because if they do, Microsoft or Meta will outcompute them and they lose the AI race entirely.
Which creates a permanent structural dependency between the two empires.
Nvidia's success isn't just because they make a good chip.
It's because the underlying architecture of the digital symbiotic empire demands that chip in ever-increasing, insatiable quantities.
Let's visualize this for a second just to ground it in reality for you.
Paint the picture.
Every time you open your phone and casually type a query into Gemini,
Or every time you let a YouTube video autoplay to the next one while you're washing dishes.
somewhere in the world, in a massive, windowless, heavily air-conditioned server farm stretching across acres of land.
An NVIDIA chip is firing up, drawing immense amounts of electricity, and doing the math.
Your simple, everyday actions are the raw fuel driving the most complex hardware supply chain in human history.
Google's software empire, which feels invisible, weightless, and entirely in the cloud.
Is quite literally built on a heavy, hot, power-hungry physical foundation of NVIDIA silicon.
And it extends far beyond just NVIDIA.
Oh, absolutely. The analysis explicitly mentions that the massive expansion of Google Cloud to support this AI infrastructure lifts up the entire data center component industry.
We are talking about the companies that manufacture the advanced liquid cooling systems required to keep these dense server racks from melting down.
We are talking about the massive power transformers,
The miles of high-bandwidth fiber optic cables.
the custom networking switches.
When Google decides it needs to expand the territory of the digital dollar to train a new AI model, they drag a massive global industrial supply chain up with them.
The symbiosis is deep, it is highly physical, and it is capital intensive.
Which brings us back to the core investment thesis of the research.
The whole reason we're talking about this.
If you are a retail investor trying to guess who is going to win the AI software war, Google, Microsoft, or Meta, you might be asking the wrong question entirely.
If you buy into the hardware infrastructure that they all fundamentally rely on, you don't really care who wins the software interface war.
You win either way because they all have to pay the exact same toll to build out their data centers.
It's the classic selling shovels during a gold rush dynamic.
But on a scale never before seen in human history.
Exactly. However, this raises an important question.
What's that?
The hardware, the silicon, the server farms, that is the back end. That's how the capacity is generated and the models are trained.
Right.
But how does this symbiosis manifest on the front end, where the actual B2B and B2C money changes hands?
Where does the economic multiplier really kick in to benefit the other software giants?
Right, because laying down fiber optic cable and buying $30,000 GPUs is an immense expense. It's an outflow of cash.
Where does the revenue pipeline connect these giants together to make it a true symbiotic empire rather than just a massive spending spree?
And that leads us to a really fascinating dynamic that the analysis breaks down.
The grand intersection of cloud computing and digital advertising.
Yes. If we look at the financial flows outlined in the text, it presents a fascinating economic pipeline.
It starts with a bold but accurate assertion.
YouTube is the world's largest, most effective advertising billboard, period.
It is the digital town square where global commerce is introduced to consumers with unparalleled precision.
But the analysis doesn't stop at calculating Google's ad revenue.
It traces the journey of the dollar further downstream.
The countless companies, from tiny direct-to-consumer startups in a garage to massive global Fortune 500 brands that advertise on YouTube to reach those consumers.
They don't just exist in a vacuum.
Exactly. They need their own complex digital infrastructure to actually run their businesses, manage their supply chains, and fulfill the orders that those Google ads generate.
Okay, so let's walk through this because this is where the symbiotic web gets incredibly tangled.
In the best way possible for the valuations of these tech giants.
These advertising businesses, the ones writing the checks to Google for the ad space, fundamentally rely on enterprise software for their daily operations.
They manage their complex spreadsheets, their internal communications, their HR departments, and their video calls.
On Microsoft software, specifically Microsoft 365, Teams, and Excel.
And when it comes to hosting their own websites, processing the e-commerce transactions securely, and storing their own massive databases of customer information.
Where do they go?
The research points out they predominantly host their servers on Amazon AWS or Microsoft Azure.
Let's dissect this brilliant business pipeline because it truly is the core of the digital ecosystem's economic multiplier effect.
Let's create a hypothetical scenario to make it real.
Okay, a user sits down on their couch and watches a YouTube video on their smart TV.
They are served a highly targeted ad for a new, specialized pair of running shoes from a mid-sized, rapidly growing company.
The targeting is perfect because Google's AI knows this user has been searching for marathon training plans.
Right. The user clicks the ad, goes to the website, and buys the shoes for $150.
In that single, seemingly isolated interaction, Google captured maybe $1 or $2 of ad revenue.
But look at what happens next.
That mid-sized shoe company now has to process the order, manufacture the shoe, and ship it.
They coordinate their global logistics team using a Microsoft Windows PC.
They track their inventory in real time across multiple warehouses using Microsoft Enterprise software.
And the entire B2C e-commerce website where that transaction securely took place.
It is running on Amazon's cloud infrastructure, AWS.
I mean, when you lay it out like that, it's honestly a bit mind-blowing.
Especially when you consider the corporate posturing we constantly see in the media.
Google is out there spending billions, paving the massive digital roads through search and YouTube.
Driving billions of highly targeted consumers down the highway.
And companies like Microsoft, Amazon, and Meta are essentially acting as the toll booths.
The infrastructure providers and the shops built right along those exact roads.
Every single time, Google's AI gets slightly better at keeping you watching YouTube for an extra 5 minutes.
They are inadvertently creating a wave of downstream economic activity that fills the pockets of their biggest rivals.
Exactly. The critical insight for you, the listener,
The takeaway you need to internalize for your financial understanding
is that every single dollar Google spends making YouTube more engaging or making its search algorithm more precise ultimately trickles down to Amazon's cloud division and Microsoft's software division.
The success is shared because the fundamental infrastructure of modern digital commerce is shared.
Think about what that actually means for the executives at these companies.
While the CEOs of Microsoft and Google might trade barbs in the press,
Or testify in front of Congress about how intensely they compete with one another in the AI space.
behind closed doors, the financial reality is entirely different.
Microsoft's cloud executives are secretly thrilled when YouTube's user base grows.
Why? Because they know the math.
They know that more internet activity, more ad clicks, more small businesses getting off the ground and scaling up thanks to Google's ad network.
Equals a direct, proportionate increase in AWS and Microsoft Azure cloud usage.
The businesses that Google helps create immediately become Microsoft and Amazon's best-paying enterprise customers.
They are symbiotically linked at the most fundamental economic level.
The analysis is very explicit about this relationship.
It states that Google paves the way, and the digital shops built on that road see their revenues rise in tandem.
It is a highly efficient, self-reinforcing loop of corporate wealth generation.
The growth of the digital economy isn't isolated to the platform that initiates the interaction.
It reverberates through the entire technological stack.
When the tide rises, it truly lifts all these massive boats.
So we've got the hardware symbiosis. Google needs Nvidia to physically process the massive amounts of data.
And we have the economic B2D pipeline symbiosis. Google's consumer ads generate the commerce that runs on Amazon and Microsoft's enterprise backend systems.
But what locks this all into place permanently?
Because if I'm listening to this, my next question is, why can't some completely new, heavily funded startup come in, build a new road, and bypass Microsoft, Google, and Amazon entirely?
Why are these particular companies so deeply entrenched that the research suggests betting your retirement on them?
That is the pivotal question.
It's the question every venture capitalist asks when looking at a new startup trying to unseat the giants.
And it transitions us into one of the most powerful structural concepts in the analysis.
The moat of platform standardization.
It's not just a happy accident of history that these specific companies are rising together.
No, their mutual growth is structurally locked in by the standardization of the internet itself.
Okay, let's really define this concept of the moat, because I think it gets misused a lot.
It does. In traditional business investing, if you read Warren Buffett's early letters, a moat is a competitive advantage that protects a company's profits from being attacked by competitors.
It's usually thought of as something proprietary and defensive.
A secret recipe, a patented piece of manufacturing technology.
Or a massive brand advantage that keeps everyone else out of the castle.
But the analysis we are reviewing completely redefines the concept of the moat for the digital age.
It absolutely does, and it's a brilliant redefinition.
The research argues that in the digital symbiotic empire, the moat isn't about keeping people out by hoarding secrets or locking down proprietary tech in a silo.
The moat is structural standardization.
Because of its massive planetary scale, Google essentially sets the ultimate standards for how search, video, and basic web protocols operate globally.
And because of this absolute dominance, millions of third-party developers, software engineers, and entire companies worldwide are effectively forced to build their apps, services, and websites to align with Google's specific technical standards.
Can you give me a concrete example of how Google's standard becomes a moat for everyone else?
Sure, because usually if one company sets the standard, they use it to crush the others. How does this standardization help Apple or Microsoft?
Let's look at web browsers as a perfect example of this dynamic.
Okay.
Google Chrome dominates the browser market, and it runs on an open source engine called Chromium, which Google heavily steers.
Right.
Years ago, Microsoft spent billions trying to maintain its own proprietary browser engines. First Internet Explorer, then the original Edge.
It was a massive drag on resources.
And developers hated building websites twice to ensure compatibility. Eventually, Microsoft surrendered.
They gave up.
They rebuilt Microsoft Edge using Google's Chromium engine.
Wow, so Microsoft literally gave up and adopted Google's core technology.
Yes, but here is why it's symbiotic. By standardizing on Chromium, Microsoft saved billions in R&D.
They ensured that every web app that works on Chrome works flawlessly on Windows via Edge.
The standard became a universal language.
And let's look at another example highlighted in the text, the universal login or single sign-on.
The ability to use a single Google account or an Apple ID to log into thousands of entirely unrelated non-Google apps and websites.
By making the Google account the foundational identity layer of the internet, developers no longer have to build their own complex, secure database and login systems from scratch.
They just plug into Google's standard API.
This global standardization ends up drastically lowering the barrier to entry for developing new software.
And here is the symbiotic payoff, right? Because it is so easy and standardized to develop across platforms. Who benefits from this explosion of new apps?
Apple gets a much more vibrant, heavily populated app store.
Developers can easily build apps using universal web standards and deploy them to iOS.
And Microsoft gets a far more robust, indispensable Windows environment because all of these web apps and cloud services run flawlessly on their operating system.
Google's standard becomes the invisible glue that holds Apple's hardware ecosystem and Microsoft's enterprise ecosystem together.
What's truly fascinating here is the sheer gravity of this standard.
I want you to consider the switching costs.
Imagine how nearly impossible it would be for a new competitor to enter this space and try to replace this oligopoly.
The well-funded newcomer isn't just taking on Google's search algorithm.
They are trying to disrupt a globally agreed-upon language of code, API structures, and deeply ingrained user behavior that Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and millions of independent developers also rely heavily upon for their own profitability.
The system inherently protects itself because Everyone, even the competitors, is heavily invested in the current standard remaining the standard.
It's like trying to invent a brand new language and convince the entire global business world to stop speaking English tomorrow.
It literally doesn't matter if your new language is technically better, more logical, or more efficient.
The switching costs for the entire globe to rewrite all their contracts and retrain all their employees are far too high.
The visual mention of the research is so perfect for this.
The seamless communication protocols between devices, or the sheer terror and inconvenience of forgetting your primary Google password, because it is connected to literally everything from your bank account to your smart fridge to your work email.
That immense convenience for you, the user, is actually the structural mortar holding the entire big tech fortress together.
They've made it so incredibly easy for us to operate within their system that we are permanently locked in.
And because we're locked in, they are locked into each other.
This redefinition of the economic moat is brilliant. Traditional moats isolate a company. Think of a walled city.
But the digital standardization moat integrates the company so deeply into the fabric of the broader economy that removing them would cause catastrophic structural failure to thousands of other businesses.
This is why the research refers to it as an empire.
It's not a single isolated castle on a hill. It's a vast, interconnected network of digital roads, aqueducts, and trade routes that everyone relies on to survive.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? We've talked about the physical hardware symbiosis driven by AI compute demands.
We've traced the B2B economic pipeline from consumer ads to enterprise cloud hosting.
And we've explored the impenetrable, self-reinforcing moat of technical standardization.
Now we need to pivot from the mechanics of the tech world to the practical, actionable application for your wallet.
This is the culmination of the analysis. This is the explanation of exactly why you need to invest in big tech companies.
Let's dive into the core investment thesis, why you need to be buying the system.
This is where the theoretical analysis translates into highly practical financial strategy.
The research, as we established at the beginning, is ultimately targeted at investors and retirement fund managers.
And its core thesis is that this deeply symbiotic relationship we've just outlined is the precise, fundamental reason why long-term capital, like a 401k or an IRA, should be directed into broad-based tech indices.
The text specifically advocates for the NASDAQ 100 or specific big tech ETFs.
Rather than engaging in the risky behavior of trying to pick individual winning stocks.
Okay, let's unpack the financial logic here, because it really goes against the instinct of a lot of retail investors.
We all want to be the genius who finds the next Amazon in a garage.
Or the next Apple right before the iPhone launches.
We want the 10,000% return.
But the research is arguing that investing heavily in a single tech stock, even an absolute giant like Google or Apple, carries a massive amount of idiosyncratic risk.
That's the risk of that specific company making a fatal generational error.
For example, maybe Apple completely misses the boat on a new spatial computing paradigm, and the Vision Pro is a dead end.
Or maybe Google's Gemini hallucinates so badly in a high-profile situation that it permanently destroys their search credibility.
If you own just that one stock, your retirement portfolio takes a massive, potentially unrecoverable hit.
Precisely. Individual companies, no matter how large, will inevitably face periods of underperformance.
Regulatory hurdles from the EU or the US government.
Or leadership crises when visionary founders leave.
But the critical takeaway from the data is that while a single company might stumble, the interconnected digital empire system itself will not collapse.
The broader trend of digitization is relentless.
By investing in a big tech ETF, which is an exchange-traded fund that basically acts as a basket holding shares of all these major companies at once,
you are abstracting your investment away from the success or failure of a specific product release.
Instead, you are investing in the underlying infrastructure of the modern digital world.
You are buying the entire ecosystem.
Let me use an analogy here. It's the difference between trying to guess which specific restaurant is going to be the most popular in a rapidly growing city
versus just buying the utility company that supplies the water and electricity to all the restaurants in the city.
You are buying the whole infrastructure rather than betting on whether the Italian place or the sushi place will have a better quarter.
I want to highlight a really specific, powerful phrase used in the research here.
It talks about investing in the territory of the digital dollar.
What does that actually mean in a macroeconomic context?
It's a profound economic concept. The territory of the digital dollar refers to the percentage of total human economic activity that takes place within digital ecosystems versus the physical world.
Let's look at the trajectory. As artificial intelligence like Gemini advances,
As algorithms become vastly more predictive,
and as digital platforms make life increasingly frictionless,
more and more of our daily lives migrates online.
our shopping, our high-end entertainment, our remote work, our B2B supply chain logistics, even our socialization, it all moves to the digital realm.
The physical territory of the economy, brick-and-mortar stores, physical media shrinks,
And the digital territory expands dramatically.
and the true owners, the digital landlords who collect rent on this constantly expanding digital territory, are the collection of all these interconnected big tech firms we've been talking about,
Exactly. When you buy a broad index of these companies like the NASDAQ 100,
which is heavily weighted toward these massive tech firms based on their market capitalization.
you are buying a proportional stake in the expansion of that territory.
As the research powerfully argues, as long as human activity continues to migrate toward digital convenience,
Which is a macro trend that shows absolutely zero signs of reversing.
the total value of that territory will inevitably increase.
And because of the deeply symbiotic nature we discussed earlier, it frankly doesn't matter which specific company builds the new shiny software attraction that brings the next billion people online.
The value of the entire interconnected territory rises.
So if you are sitting at home constantly refreshing financial news, trying to guess whether Microsoft's integration of ChatGPT into Bing is going to ultimately defeat Google's Gemini in the AI search race,
You are completely missing the forest for the trees.
the research is essentially telling you to stop playing that stressful, high-risk guessing game. It's unnecessary.
By holding a NASDAQ 100 ETF in your retirement account, you are structurally guaranteed to win, regardless of who wins that specific AI battle.
Why? Because both Microsoft and Google are paying rent to the same interconnected system.
They both rely on Nvidia chips to train those models.
They both rely on standardized web protocols to deliver the answers.
They both benefit immensely from an overall increase in high-bandwidth internet traffic.
This raises an incredibly important point about financial peace of mind, which is central to the ultimate message for retirement planners.
Investing over a 30-year time horizon is fundamentally about managing systemic risk.
The risk of the entire digital ecosystem collapsing is astronomically lower than the risk of one single tech CEO making a bad strategic pivot or missing a technological shift.
The analysis offers a paradigm where you align your capital with the unstoppable compounding macro force of digital expansion rather than betting on corporate micro battles.
It argues very persuasively that becoming a shareholder in this broad symbiotic system is the clearest, most reliable shortcut to compounding wealth and ensuring an early, comfortable retirement.
It's about a fundamental shift in perspective. You have to transition from being a sports fan, rooting for a specific team on the field,
To being the owner of the stadium who gets a cut of the ticket sales, the broadcasting rights, the hot dogs, and the parking, regardless of who actually wins the game that day.
The system itself is the ultimate wealth-generating asset.
And that system, as we've explored in depth, is deeply, intricately, and permanently bound together.
From the massive behavioral data sets harvested globally by Google, feeding the advanced AI that demands Nvidia's physical hardware architecture,
Cascading down into the B2B advertising pipelines that fuel Microsoft and Amazon's enterprise cloud services.
all locked tightly into place by the universal technical standards that make Apple's premium devices indispensable to the consumers.
It is a single, breathing, highly profitable economic organism.
Which is just a brilliant, eye-opening way to conceptualize it.
As we prepare to wrap up this deep dive, I want to quickly recap the journey we've just been on.
Because it really challenges the conventional wisdom of how the tech world operates and how we should be investing our money.
We started with a counterintuitive idea that Google's massive financial success is actually cheered on behind closed doors by its rivals.
We saw how Google's relentless data harvesting via search and YouTube acts as a massive funnel, drawing human attention into the digital realm.
And forcing a hardware capex explosion that essentially crowns Nvidia as the undisputed king of physical infrastructure.
We then traced the complex economic multiplier, showing how a single YouTube ad click initiates a cascade of downstream B2B commerce.
That directly pumps massive revenue into Amazon's AWS and Microsoft's enterprise software divisions.
We explored how the standardization of these platforms, like universal logins and shared browser engines, creates an impenetrable moat.
Not by keeping competitors out, but by making everyone, from developers to end users, entirely dependent on the shared system.
And finally, we tied it all back to your wallet and your retirement strategy, the ultimate reason why you should invest in big tech.
The ultimate takeaway from the analysis is clear. Stop watching the corporate fistfights on financial news networks.
Stop trying to pick the one stock that will rule them all.
Start looking at the unified symbiotic system. By directing your long-term investments into broad big tech ETFs or the NASDAQ 100, you are buying the infrastructure of the future.
You're buying the expanding territory of the digital dollar.
But before we leave you today, I want to leave you with a final, slightly provocative thought to mull over.
Something that builds on everything we've discussed but flips the perspective on its head.
If the analysis is correct and these massive companies are truly this deeply interconnected, functioning more like vital organs in a single massive digital body rather than independent, resilient entities, it raises a terrifying systemic vulnerability.
Okay, I'm listening. Where does the vulnerability lie in a system this strong and this profitable?
At what point does a catastrophic failure in just one foundational pillar threaten the entire structure?
That's a huge question.
Let's say there is an unprecedented, unfixable hardware supply chain bottleneck for Nvidia. Perhaps geopolitical tension in Taiwan halts chip manufacturing entirely.
Or what if there's a massive, prolonged global outage in Amazon's AWS cloud infrastructure due to a sophisticated cyber attack?
Or a fundamental security flaw discovered in Google's universal standardization protocols.
If they are all vital organs sharing the exact same digital blood supply, does a failure in one cause localized pain? Or does it threaten to cause sudden cardiac arrest for the entire symbiotic empire all at once?
If their success and their phenomenal growth are entirely shared, is their ultimate systemic vulnerability shared too?
It's a profound question of whether this incredible symbiosis has quietly, efficiently created the largest single point of failure in human economic history.
Wow. That is definitely something to think about the next time you look at your investment portfolio and see how much of the global economy relies on a few data centers running perfectly.
The immense strength of the web is also, paradoxically, its greatest risk.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden architecture of the modern digital economy.
It completely changes how you look at the apps on your phone, the hardware in the cloud, and the funds in your retirement account.
Keep exploring, keep questioning the obvious narratives, and we will see you next time.